So this is where I left the construction of the GWR Open Wagon 02 on my last video, and what I had done by then is to create the wheel and the wheel sets, rather, the pairs of wheels with the axle, spokes, etc., and line them up according to the position of these on the left hand side, and then made sure that I just use the same distance between the center line and this wheel set to then produce this wheel set here. And that's because no matter how careful you arrange your plan, you invariably end up with some minor differences in position. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to make the axle boxes and the W frames. So for that, all I need is at this stage, all I need is the side view. So having highlighted that, I shall tell it to hide everything that isn't selected. So I'm just left with that, and I've got texture correction turned on all of these. Obviously you won't see anything there because we're looking at the edge, just the edge of the diagram. I fall back a bit and have a go at selecting. There it is. So it's over that side. There it is. That's this one. Disappears because it has only 2 dimensions. So 3D modeling programs are the only places, I think, though maybe quantum physics would tell us otherwise, where you can have 2-dimensional objects existing. And you can also see that although I've got this as level as I possibly can, the upper bar, you can see there, look, there's a bit of white there. So that's why you take these diagrams, follow them as closely as you possibly can, but remember that you've got to adjust them to make them as correct. Now let's just have another look at that picture that I've been using, and here it is. This is what I'm going to be making, these here. You can see that part here, and you can see the leaf springs there. The springing is in front of them, and then we've got the axle box here. So we've got the W frames. I think they're still called W frames even when they've got that curved bit there, and I appreciate that some of that is going to be hidden behind this part of the framing here, but I will be wanting to use this mesh when I finish it for other wagons, and there may be a larger or smaller amount of mesh showing. So I shall model the whole thing, including the curve piece, which will put the polys up but is a worthwhile expenditure. So let's have another look there. Comes down, there's a bar across the bottom there, and the axle, and it's only about, I would say that's only about 1/2 inch thick. That's maybe 3/4, and it's got a bolt at the bottom there. Okay, so let's have a go. So how do I approach this? Well, I use, instead of standard primitives, I use splines. And then once I've got the shape, I will extrude it. So I shall make the image as a 2-dimensional spline. I shall make this part, the W, as a spline, and then take it up to 3 dimensions by extruding it. So first of all, I want to do this curved piece, and I've got 8.072. Whenever I get a measure like that, I'm always very suspicious of this little 0.072. Let's take it back to 8 inches, because I suspect that is what the wagon designer, the designers at Swindon, actually designed. And you can see there now, let's just get a better colour, more or less, to see. And let's zoom in a bit. So we've got a curve of the spine, of a spline rather, there. Okay, So now I'm going to clone it. I'm going to guess that instead of a 1 foot 4 inches across, that it's 1 foot 2 inches. In other words, 2 inches between there and there. That's probably not enough, but I'm going to alter that, because we're working on the radii, down to 6. Sorry, that'll take it down to a foot. There we are, look, and it's still not enough. So if I take that down to 10 inches diameter, 5 inches radius, it's still a little big. I like to work in full inches if I possibly can. I suspect that that's what the designer did, but it doesn't look like I'm going to be able to do that. So 4.5, let's have a look there. It's when you get this sort of broken up diagram with just a few pixels showing you the detail, that you, even if you scan this in very high res, which I've tried in the past, you don't necessarily get a much clearer image. Grayscale, which is what this is, will be more clear than, take that down 1/4 inch. Yeah, I think that's too much. I think what I should be doing is having it being centering on this piece here. So I'm going to go back up. Let's go back to 4.5 inches. I feel I'm happier with that. So this is 8 inches and that is 4.5. So that is 3.5 inches, which means 8.55. I don't want that. 4.5. There we are. And that means that we've got an 8-inch radius circle there and a 4.5-inch radius circle there, which means that the actual distance between there is going to be 4.5 from 8 is 3.5 inches, naturally enough. So that's going to give us our width here. So I'm leaving these at the moment, and I just want to go back to my splines, and I'm going to make a rectangle. Nice green one. There we are, and 3.662, so 3.5 is what I want. Okay, and let's just have a look. Excuse me, have a look at that. Well, I actually need it to come right the way down, so let's increase it. Let's try 2 foot first of all. And I'm going from the middle of the circles down to there. That's not enough. I wanted to bring it right the way down. Let's have another look at that picture. Well, it's going to be engulfed by that, so I'm going to take it down to this point. 2.1. That actually moves only down a half. Now I'm going to go into wireframe, because I want to make sure here I get those into position, but I think I need a little bit more length to it, so I'm going to go 2.1, 2 foot 1.5 inches. Then just using it, positioning it by I. Where are we? X. And I'm looking to get it in the middle of where that face becomes that face, so in there. So if I zoom right in and I just move it up by I, which is usually enough to do it. There we are. So let's see if that is what we want. Yes, I think so. We can give that a little bit more depth, I think. Clearly there's a difference between this piece here, the vertical height of that piece, and the height showing there, and it's also showing as if this piece extends past it, and yet here it clearly doesn't. Just looking over here, no, that's the same, of course. Right, so we're going to go with the picture rather than with the plan, because almost invariably the plan is less accurate than seeing the real thing. So now I'll take a clone of my spline, rectangular spline, and take it here. Now this claims to be narrower, a fair bit narrower, and let's have a look there. Well, it's almost impossible to see. I can't see anything there which suggests that it's narrower, although that certainly does look narrower, and that would be the case if you do narrow a rectangle by simply slanting it, rather, in other words, moving the lower two points rather than rotating it. So I'm going to we'll try this. I'll go down to 3 inches, just take ½ an inch off for the moment. Okay, I'm going to clone it again and take it down to the point where it, which I suspect is the same as that one. So what I should do is go into wireframe and position the vertical position of this the same as the vertical position here. Okay, and then what I need to do is to have a look at my rectangle. What I'm going to do is convert it to an editable spline, and that's what you want to do, edit to an editable spline, not an editable poly. Pick it up in the y-axis, and you can see what's happening. It's making a complete mess. What have I done wrong here? Let's position that there. Okay, and I need to move the little grab handle over so as to give me, and it'll jump. You'll see it there, it jumps, and that position needs to go up. There we are. And if I now take this point and move it across, I'm just guessing. Let's have a look in wireframe, and let's zoom right in, because I think that one's out, that one's not correctly positioned. Here we are. I'm sure this one isn't. Let's bring that over. Now you might be thinking, well, what's the point of doing all this? This is just a lot of hassle. Whereas you can just freehand draw up with sort of a spline. I think this is more accurate. You produce a better. Now I'm not worrying about my S-bend there. Let's have a look. I think is not just close enough, I think that's correct. There's the little grab handle, make sure that's right over the top of it. And for this one as well it is. And for this one, yes, and for this one, yes. Okay, so what I shall do now is in wireframe, I shall take, well, first of all what I do is I'm going to colour this differently. Let's use a red this time. And I shall clone this one, bring it over. Okay. Make sure it's in position. There it is exactly. And then take a clone of this. Now, never use reflect. Because reflect creates all sorts of problems in the exported mesh. Even if you use xform rather, reset xform, and the origin of the in the mesh within Gmax, you're still going to get a problem. So never, never, never use reflect. Have to say, of course, now all I'm doing is I'm rotating this 180 degrees. I'm looking down here to make sure I've got it rotated correctly, and then I can just move that along until I've got those 2 points, like those 2 points there, absolutely positioned on my green line. I do use these two-dimensional splines a lot for creating more complex sort of shapes, and they're valuable because they give you a lot of flexibility and they allow you a lot of manipulation. But what you do have to do is get the spline absolutely finished. You'll see what I'm going to do is I'm going to join all these together in a minute, and you've got to make sure you've got those all absolutely finished and the whole thing joins up before you then decide to extrude it. I will do a whole carriage side, window spaces, door spaces, even the curve of the tumble home at the bottom of late 19th, early 20th century carriages. I will do as splines like this. So convert that to an editable spline, because I'm going to take this up. That's line. That's going to go right there. Okay. And then the spline there, segment rather, is what I want. So I've just taken that bit from there to there, delete it. Okay. And actually what I can now do, having done that correctly for that one, make sure that's all centered up. What I do, I know it seems a bit perverse, but clone that and then center it over here and delete that one. There we are, getting there. Now these circles, let's convert them to splines, and this is really important because, and then we're going to take out the segments because we only want half of these, and they must convert to splines because you've got to join them all up into a single spline very shortly. There we are. And then more splines, and take out a segment there. And notice I haven't done anything down here yet. I'm going to sort that in a moment. And editable spline, take out that segment up the top there. A segment is connecting between two vertex points. Okay, now let's have a go at this one. It's already an editable spline. Take out that segment, we don't want that, or that. You can see what's going to happen. We're going to end up with a shape which is the W frame, or whatever its proper term is. I've always called it a W frame, probably wrongly. Not worried. You can see they're all different colours, which means they're not all joined up. I just want to have another check here. I feel that that point, the bottom of that point there, is too high. There, it's coming up too high. So let's zoom in. Let's select that vertex, zoom in, and I'm going to bring that down a bit. Let's have a look. Let's have a look at it in wireframe. Those two look more parallel. Those are not parallel. You can see that then it's narrow there. Obviously it's wider there, but if I was to go across, measure across there and then across there, those are diverging. And the height of that is 19757. So I could just clone it and move it across again, do that. 19, there we are, got an inch, 19.757. Take that down. Okay. Right, well, problem here is, of course, we can't join them up or anything because we've got this bit here. So my next job is to put in a couple of vertices on this light green one. So let's select it, and this time vertices, and now we come right the way down on the left hand side menu, over here, bottom left, look, refine. That's the one we want, and we're going to refine it by adding in a couple of points, 1, 2, and we're not worried. I'm not worried yet as to their position. Turn that off. So that's what do they call those? A radio button, where you turn them on or off. But by now you must be beginning to twig what it is I'm doing. Must beginning to realise. Not quite sure about the movement there. I think that's it. And here, well, we know what this should be, don't we? Shouldn't it be? What's that? That was the other one, wasn't it? So I'm just doing this by eye. And there we are. So we've added that in, and now we can go to segment, because we've now created one segment into 3. Chop it off, and there we are. Just got this one to do. Or take that one, make sure I got that centered, edit, clone, rotate, looking down here to make sure I know the degrees that I'm doing it, 180, and I can just center it over this one, and then pick up the underneath green one, and there it is. Make sure I'm right. Yep, looks good. Okay, so there we are. So that's this part of the W frame done as far as splines are concerned. Now we're going to put it all together and extrude it, except one thing I've done when I've been doing this, I've made this mistake several times, is that I've got bits of spline over here, over here, over here. In other words, to the back, to the front, not all on the same line. They will have to be on the same line here, all on this same axis. Now, of course, you can just do that you can just check that by going here and looking down here, X, to make sure they're all on. Because what happens if you come to join them up and they're not all there, then you get it, they create, you think you're going to join splines up, but in fact you don't. Well, you do, but it's bizarre. I'll do one in a minute. Tell you what, let's do it now. I'll show you what happens. So I'm going to take a clone of this, not the correct way that I wanted to go. There we are, over here. So it's just a demonstration. Now imagine that we didn't have all of these splines on the 0 axis here. So for example, let's move this back, wrong way, undo, let's move it back here, and this one back a bit as well. Now the way in which you join these splines is pretty straightforward. First, and this is my example. And first of all, I do it on the one that I'm going to be using. Then I'm going to show you what happens if you do it without making sure they're all on that 0 line. So, having picked up the spline that I'm going to start with, I'm then just going to attach all these others. They don't have to be touching. Now there's one that isn't touching the ones I've already done. Okay, and now I'm going to, so it's now a single editable spline. I've added them all together, and it's now a single editable spline, all the one colour, the colour of the first one I started with. Then with vertices, I'm going to weld loads of vertices. All these show that there are more than one vertex exactly on one point. In fact, all of these here, there are 2 vertices, because they're where different splines have been added together and joined. Now they've been each section has been joined to this section here, this original section, but they're not, in other words, they're all part of the same spline, but they're not actually connected up. If we zoom in to one of these, I pick and then I move in the x-axis. There we are, look, they're not joined together. There's the end of that one and there's the end of that one. Let's go back. So what we must do is physically join them together, not physically, but within the program, join them together. We're going to weld them. Now in Trainz's game pack for GMAX, this is always the default distance comes up. Not a clue why. It seems the most bizarre number, just under 4 inches. I always make it no inches, or rather I make it 1/10 of an inch, but you might need to make it even smaller, and that's because otherwise, if you make it a large number, then all of the vertices that you've identified, if they're within, say all of those are within 4 inches of each other, they'll all pile up together, and that will become like a triangular shape. Okay, so let's do it. Let's weld them. And now, instead of having, for example, 4 of these handles for moving, adjusting about, for each point, we've only got 2. And also, if you look around your spline, you'll see there's only one of the start, stroke, finish splines. So they're the ones that are identified with this square, as opposed to all the others which are identified by a cross. Okay, so we've joined all those together. If we have a look in down here, that's where they all are. Now that's with them all on the 0 line, but that's the one I was going to show you, which is not all on the 0 line. You'll see what happens when I do this. So what I'm going to do is, first of all, I'm going to attach them all, thinking, haha, I've got my splines all finished, isn't this great? I can just do them, and immediately over here you'll see a difference. And the difference is that you've got, instead of having here, which is like a rectangular surround, you've got a box surround, which indicates that some of the items are in a different position to these. They're not on the 0 axis. And now if I join them together, let's take it right through to the, select all the ones I want to join, and then I weld them. Well, some of them are going to be left out because they're too far away, which is no good at all. So let's say select these and think, oh well, I can bodge this up, I can just move those in, look, really close. That's more or less where they are. Let's have another look. There they are, look. Let's select just those, let's join those. Still too far away. Let's make them, let's put that 4-inch one, that will join them up. And what do we get? Look at that, what a mess. Well, obviously that was too much. Undo the weld. Let's make it 2 inches, because what I want to show you, hopefully it's going to do it. No, you can always tell when it's done it. No, doesn't so. It will say no vertices to weld it. No, it's just going to do that. So it's a mess anyway, and I've done that in the past and cursed myself for doing it. No good. Make sure it is all on the same plane that you want that in. Okay, so we said it was going to be 1/2 inch thick. So let's select our spline, and we get this great button here, extrude, which is the lovely button. It's where it all comes together, all your work producing your spline. I mean, this is a simple spline to produce, but you imagine a carriage side, especially when you produce the spline like that and then you curve the bottom inwards. The spline, so the spline is, although it's like that, you've also got a curve here, which you do it afterwards at the very last piece, and then you extrude the whole thing. It's fun doing carriages. Great Western Railway carriages with tumble homes. Okay, so we're going to extrude that. Now, first of all, it's a handy tool because by now it's now made a 3D version of your 2D spline. Although there's no depth to it, you can see there's no depth, because the depth is here. Look, the amount of the extrusion is 0, so there's no, so it's still only two dimensions. But having joined your, it checks to see if you joined, essentially if you joined your spline up correctly, because unless you get this solid image, if for example we didn't have all of the vertices correctly welded together, then we just get a hollow again. You wouldn't get this solid output, and we know we want it to be ½ inch thick, so let's make it ½ inch thick, and there it is, jumped out, and it's jumped. Let's have a look at our polygon counter. Unextrude it, it was 180, re-extrude it, 180, right. 44, that's right. So it's only when we go to extrude it that we start creating polys. What it's done is it's created virtual polys. Let's put that back to 0, which is what it starts at. It's created the third dimension, but the third dimension is 0 depth, but it's still there, and you can see that reflected in the polys. So let's stretch those out. That's basically all we've done. So we just grab the front and the back face and pull them apart by ½ inch, and that's going to be our piece here. And we seem to have done that okay. So 180. So now we're not going to worry too much, except what I would advise is immediately we've got it centered, let's save our work and save as. You remember I always have 2 copies on the go. Sometimes if Gmax crashes you can lose a copy, and it does crash. So I'm going to take a clone, stick it over there, forget about it, because what I want to do here, and it's a clone of this, so we've still got the spline. If we want to go back and alter it by removing the extrusion, we can go back and alter it, but at the same time we want to keep this one, and we're going to collapse it all, which collapses it to a mesh showing it's 180 polys. Then we're going to editable polys, which takes it down to 48. And there we are, that's our W frame. I'm going to take a slurp of coffee. So you've amazed yourself and produced a 3D extrusion from a spline. So let's go back to our side view and let's get the image up and have a quick look at the photograph, just to remind ourselves. That's actually deeper than here, it's deeper than that. You can see that, and it's got a couple of rivets on it, which I'll come to. Bolts rather, it's not rivets, is it? I think it's riveted. Looks like it's bolted. They look more like rivets there, maybe they're bolts. It's alright, I don't need to know, nobody needs to tell me. Leave a comment or anything. I'm not interested. And I've made sure I got that. Now, centered it, in other words, it's centered on the ½ inch. There we are, look. You can see the ½ inch there. There's the 0, and then it's extruded it ½ inch, and I've now got the centering at 1/4 inch. There we are, look. There's the 0, 1/4 inch, ½ inch. Okay. Let's make that piece, and for that we don't need a spline, it's just a box, and we're just going to guess. They are nice big deep bolts, and there we are. And we're going to get the position right, or to get the size right. Let's just have a look this way. Yeah, what are we? The long dimension, 1 foot. I think it's probably 1'4". No, that's too little. Maybe it was 1'5". Okay, 1'5". Depth needs to be about here, so at the moment we are 2.72. Right, take it back to 2. That was that depth going backwards. Take it back to 4 deep. Let's have a look here. That's too deep, so take it back to 3.5. Let's go into wireframe just to make sure we've got. Now what we can do, because we've centered this one, so we can use that to center this on the X position. Here we are, X position. It's also a very similar color, so let's change that straight away so we can differentiate very easily what it is we're dealing with. Okay, now that was just 1/2 inch. This actually stands forward by about the amount that it extends either side. In other words, looking at the picture, the amount that it stands forward, if we zoom right in here, is about the same as it extrudes there. It also looks like it's got a nice bit of a curve on it, but I'm going to ignore that because that would just make too many polys. Don't want too many polys. So we're only extending, let's have a look at the top down, we're only extending a small amount on either side. That's between there and there. So that we've got the position, the 0 position at the moment isn't centered, the XYZ on the, actually I'm just going to take that forward by I. I'm looking at that, maybe take it a little more there. Quick look, is there much behind? Doesn't look like it. There's not a lot to see. So that was 2 inches, so let's take it down to 1.25. I think I can live with that. I think that looks about right. Yes, I think it does. So what I'm going to do is center this, but I'm not going to center it this way. I mean, it's centered this way on the X coordinate, but not on the Y coordinate. Okay, so that's the bottom piece there. You'll notice I'm not worrying about any of the texturing at the moment. I'll do that in the next tutorial. Now what I want to do is to create this springing and then the axle box, which has got quite a bit more detail. So, having had the coffee, spring sits in front of the W frame, as we can see here, and I think we can now bring back some of our other bits and pieces. That should give us, well, it's not very generous in its information. So we're going to have to work this up. But first and foremost, let's take our W frame, let's group it, and move it over. So let's just check with our picture here. Yes, it wants to be just beyond the wheel, doesn't it? So that position is 29.89. I don't like that one bit. I'm going to take 2'10", and to bring it to the other side of the wheel set, I'm going to rotate, not that way. I'm going to rotate 180 degrees, Okay, that should be 2 foot 10, and over the other side. So here we are. So we've got our wheel set. It's beginning to look a little bit more serious, and again, I'm not worried about the axle, the look of the axle. Okay, so let's now just select this, hide everything else, so we've got the image, and we're going to do the curve of the springing. 1, 2, 3, 4 leaves. And I shall actually texture this one, I think, after I've done it, because what I'm going to do is basically have a box. Not worried about the width at this stage, come back to that. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4 leaves. So it's not actually like this, it's a shape which thins as it comes to the point where it connects to the bolt up here. I think you'll see what I mean in a minute. Let's make that a little bit bigger, a little bit longer. 2 foot 10 is not, or maybe it's 3 foot. Yeah, that looks to me more like it, and it's satisfyingly round number. So in order to produce this, I am going to make this is an ordinary box, so it's just polycount of 12 at the moment because it is a just a plain box. I'm going to give it some segments, and I'm going to give the segments in its length. So looking down from here, I always choose the wrong one. No, it's not that one. So I want 7 segments. And in wireframe. I'll convert this to a poly. I'm going to give it a nicer colour. Not that I don't like pink particularly, but it's just a bit unpleasant on the eye there. And what I want to do is create the shape of the spring. So as you can see, what I'm doing is I'm picking out all the internal polys, and then I'm going to position them those two need to be horizontal, and therefore those two there and those two there. See, I've just picked up those and those, bring those down, and lift up the end ones, give it to raise up the ends of the spring. And if we look here, the spring is quite thin there and thick down there. That's what I'm going to try and reproduce. So picking up just those, take those right up. Now you might think, well, why don't I just do this with curves? But there's method in my madness. And it's all to do with thinking ahead for how I'm going to texture it. Don't want that, done that wrong. I still had these ones selected. I only wanted to adjust these. Have a quick look there. Okay, I think I just want to raise these a little. That means I can raise those. I'm looking for the effect of the curve through a series of straight lines. These straight lines here, to get the lower part of the spring. Those are still a little too high. Bring those back a little. Tad. Okay, now the next job I think is to texture it. I know this seems very early on in the process, but that's why I've made it in this way. And my first job is to select, I'm just going to select doing it on these outer faces. I'm not even going to worry about the other side at this stage. So I'm going to select that face and that face, and this is going to be these bits here. I think they're about right, and maybe a bit too far over, but we'll try it anyway. Let's have a look. Edit, and you see I've got this piece here. This is let's planar them, and what I like to do is to make that vertical 1 and these vertical 0, and now I can move them in proportion and close it up. And I need 1, 2, 3, 4. So I need 4 pale and 4 darker. So let's just take these. That's 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's going to come down, oops, to there. Right. I haven't got enough. It's not going to be enough. Those should be just 3. Okay, so that is the one with the 4th, that bit of spring. These two now are going to be reproducing just the 3, hopefully. And take those down and over to my springing. Oops. 1, 2, 3, shade. Scrunch them in a bit. Doesn't look very convincing. We're getting away with just 30 polys. The alternative is to spend a lot more polys and make a series of steps, which I'm not prepared to do. So I'm going to live with this. Let's do the next. Next ones are the 2 planar. Let's make sure we get the right ones at 1, and these should be at 0, and this is going to be just 2 leaves. Let's do that here. Doesn't really matter where I do them. And 2 springs and 2 shadows, and then the single one. Of course, what I haven't done is coloured the whole thing, which I should have done if I'd been thinking properly before I started doing these individual faces. Never mind, we shall overcome. Let me take that down and over and down some more. It's just going to be one lighter piece. Okay, so that's a bodge of a spring. Let's select those faces and then let's invert it, and let's see what else we've got here. All sorts of things. Planar map the lot. And I should dump it in that. Okay. So, not as good as it might be. Could do better, I think is the expression. But if we have a look at our axle boxes, the springs are quite deep. So we know this is the axle box, presumably somewhere here. Let's just take this over, and they sit outside the W frame. It's on the other side, isn't it? So that's not going to be the best way of looking at them. So let's take it over to here. I'm prepared to leave that at the moment as it is, because I can still adjust the width of that when I get the other components into place. Not brilliantly happy with that, not at all. Might redo that, but onwards and upwards at this stage. Let's save. And have a bash here. Quite complicated. Oh, those nice rounded edges look beautifully done. Won't be able to do that. Be so many zillion polys otherwise. So for this one I'm just going to be very straightforward. Here's the axle box. Let's have another look. Lovely and smooth. Look at all these lovely oiling points. Be nice to do them all, but no way. So this is going to be straightforward in the sense that I'm just going to make a box, and looks like it's about 6 inches, and we just make that 6 inches as well, make it square. I think that's maybe a little under square, maybe 5.5. Not that one though. There we are. And a 6-inch standard primitive of a cylinder. Don't need all the height segments at all. I'm going to push that up to 24. Radius 3 inches. depth did I give to this? Let's say 4. We'll start with 4. And cylinder the same. 4. So I'm thinking how I can. Should have done this as a spline. So back to here, back to a circle. Make a circle, make it a radius of 3 inches. Get rid of. Oops, get rid of that. Center that. Let's have a look at it in wireframe. Get the vertical position right. Across there. Convert it to an editable spline. Take out those segments. And what else do we want? Well, I might as well do it as a box as well. I don't know why I've got all those cross pieces there. I've got all those width segments. I wouldn't need those. What have we got? 5.5 by 6. So let's do a spline rectangle. Okay, it should be 6 by 5.5. So instead of making these standard primitives, I'm making them a spline. Let's center it there and there. Pick up the box. We know it's the box because that's the colour of the box. Convert this to a editable spline. Take out the segment. Okay, and then attach and vertices. Weld, it's 3 inches, okay. 0.1. So those will weld together, and those will weld together. It won't pinch up together. There we are, and now we can extrude that. I think we had it about 4 inches, didn't we? So let's have a look. Here it is. That's the beginnings of our little axle box. And I was trying to think if I could do the business with the curve on there, but I would need to make that whole series of little pizza segments. That would be far too many polys, so I'm going to live with that. Instead what I will do is I will try and, so it's just basically producing that. Let's bring in the other bits and bobs. There's our little axle box. And it's got to be X coordinate, bring it in. It's not correctly centered yet. As we can see, it should be over the axle itself, being the axle box. Also demonstrates that the axle I've made is rather large, but I'm not going to worry about it. Okay. So if we just look at our diagram up here, we need greater depth. Take another couple of inches. And then we've got quite a bit of other stuff, bits and bobs, to add in behind it. So what I want to do is to create this strapping around here, this mounting here, this piece. So that's what I'm going to do in my next tutorial, my next part for this. I'm still not happy with the spring, but you've at least seen how to make these W frames, and how I use this has mainly been about splines and extruding, and thinking about how your work is going to look when you've finished it. I'm thinking that's looking a bit too thin now. Let's look at some other pictures of wagons, see what we can find. So there we are, that's the end of this next part of making wagon 02. I'm really taking it very gently, very slowly, because I want this to be also a demonstration of the different aspects that I use when making these models for Trainz. So I hope that's been of interest. If it has, please leave a comment, give me a thumbs up, and please subscribe to my channel.